Well, having graduated from college in 1962, I'm now in my 48th year in the workforce, sort of flunking retirement. And I'm continuously amazed at how we arrived at where we are today. We're at a point of widespread uncertainness about many of our largest financial institutions. We have less than enthusiastic support for many of our government actions, and serious concern about your near-term job prospects and the economic outlook. The current economic mess, although we seem to be coming out of it, but there doesn't seem to be a better word than mess, raises issues for this course. What is the future of capitalism, and can you be confident that ethical behavior, a historical norm in the United States, will be the norm of the future? What's the relationship between the leadership of a business and its ethics? Finally, what can you look forward to when you join the workforce? I expect that's about 6 weeks in the future. And how do you choose a company or industry that holds leadership and ethics in high regard? Now, if you plan a career or even just a first job in finance, I think you should ask yourself the following questions. Can you be an ethical person and an effective business person? Is the widespread criticism of the financial services industry justified, or has the drive by the industry for profits squandered the trust upon which the global economy has been built? And third, is the industry an easier target than government policies and oversight that have failed? So let's look for the answers. In a recent New York Times column, Ben Stein, who's an economist, wrote of the standard of care that financial institutions should exercise, and I quote, "Without trust, there can be no free market capitalism. Capitalism initially took root in Europe when wealthy families had excess income to invest, and they entrusted their money to managers who would treat their funds with due care. Such standards of care require that those handling someone else's money behave with extreme rigor and honesty. The standards, which came to be known as fiduciary duty, were the same duty a court required of, say, a trustee dealing with the property of a widow, widower, or child. Trustees always had to behave with the interest of the trustor uppermost. There could be no conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict. Every relevant fact about an investment and a trusteeship had to be disclosed. As the law came to be interpreted in the United States, the trustee had to disclose every fact or belief that might influence an intelligent, reasonable investor. These laws were codified in state and federal courts after revelations of stock market corruption before and during the market crash of October 1929, a period that saw, 5 years later, in 1934, the formation of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the current SEC. There could be no material deception and no scheme or artifice to defraud. The investor's interests always had to be superior to those of the investment bank, the financial advisor, or the broker. Now, for a good long time after World War II, 1945, the laws of fiduciary duty were strictly observed. But by the 1980s, the law started to break down in a major way. There had been small scandals in the 50s and 60s, but by the end of the 1980s, the Drexel Berman, Michael Milken, junk bond scandals had exploded, revealing that deception was routinely practiced against buyers of junk bonds. Then came the closely related savings and loan scandals, leaving taxpayers defrauded in a major way. Then we weathered the high-tech scandals of the late 1990s, in which the bluest of the blue-chip brokerage firms and investment banks placed excessive valuations on companies that they peddled to investors. End quote. Now, further depth in this area is, I guess you all don't have term papers left to do anymore, but further depth in this area is offered in a new book entitled Good Value. Addressing the same question, can one be both an ethical person and an effective business person? The author, Stephen Green, who was an ordained Episcopal priest and the chairman of the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, which is one of the top 10 banks in the world, thinks so. In Good Value, Green confronts some of the vexing questions of our age and argues that despite its recent lapses, the global financial industry is more necessary than ever. Also necessary, however, are good business people who look to their principles and not just their profit margins. In order to understand the turbulence of the last 2 years, Green begins by retracing the history of the global economy and its financial systems, from ancient government granaries in Alexandria, Egypt, to the Italian banks that flourished during the Renaissance. And in fact, I recently read an article that I got from Google that the Babylonians used derivatives, a form of derivatives, to bet on the arrival of caravans. The Green finds that free markets are a persistent phenomenon throughout history, a highly efficient allocator of capital that has delivered huge advantages to humanity. But you could also make the case that the capitalism and the marketplace may have abandoned over 1 billion people to extreme poverty, encouraged overconsumption and debt, ravaged the environment, and allowed the greed and short-sightedness of the financial elite to squander the trust upon which the global economy is built. There's a good thesis topic somewhere in there. How do you reconcile the demands of capitalism with both the common good and our own spiritual and psychological needs as individuals? Well, those are helpful historical contexts, but how did we get here to where we are today? When the Wall Street Journal, and we can talk about this more in the seminar session, when the Wall Street Journal publishes a list of 25 major U.S. corporations, as they did a couple of years ago, that have had ethical lapses, starting with Adelphia, going through Enron, all the way to Xerox, we know we have a challenge to reestablish American capitalism and business as based on sound leadership and ethical behavior. And we must do this in a rapidly changing environment where we seem to favor Wall Street-based financial transactions over a company's basic commercial strategic operations. But business leaders at all levels, not just CEOs, have specific responsibilities that fall into 3 areas: ethical, legal, and economic. And here economic means the company's business and their business model. These leaders are expected to make their decisions balancing the demands of all 3. And their decisions must balance all 3 simultaneously. However, as the Wall Street Journal list shows, things have not been that well balanced, and as the events of the last 2 or 3 years on Wall Street shown, we clearly have been out of balance. And how did this happen? Well, the 1990s were to some extent the go-go years. It was the longest bull market in history. There was the internet explosion and IPOs that produced instant millionaires. There was merger mania between companies. There was a focus on corporate earnings, rising stock prices, and celebrity CEOs. Everyone seemed to want to get rich, to have an advantage over another company through earnings and IPOs, and be perceived as a great corporate leader as measured by their lifestyle, salaries, and stock holdings or options. Corporate boards of directors were often accused of, and actually performed, lackadaisical oversight and focused too much on compliance with specific rules and regulations and ignored conflicts of interest. One result of that was the very onerous Sarbanes-Oxley law that attempted to right corporate governance through additional controls. To some extent, that's working in the major corporations. Bigger questions and issues for our discussion later are, what's the correct metric for corporate leaders? Clearly, large amounts of salaries, bonuses, stock options, performance shares are part of the problem, not part of the solution. But they do have the advantage of being measurable and quantifiable. Well, what about the economic and ethical metrics of a company? How do we or how can we quantify those? Is the new trend to measure or assess corporate social responsibility, known as CSR, going to be sufficient? I think you had a discussion last week with Len Schlesinger, the Babson president, may have addressed some of those issues. Now, as we look to the future, the difference between your generation and mine, in addition to the 50 years, is that you all will probably work for 6 or 7 companies, not the 3 to 4 of your parents' generation or the 1 to 2 of my pre-baby boomer generation. These companies are also going to look quite different and will actually require more leadership and an increased focus on values and ethical cultures because they will probably be global companies and have to balance varying norms of behavior and culture. 20th century companies were structured to be bureaucratic, multi-leveled, organized with the expectation that senior management will manage and command and control all the operations, characterized by policies and procedures that created many complicated internal interdependencies. They had limited horizontal control issues. You could actually manage and lead face-to-face because of the control environment and narrow spans of control. 3 of these people reporting to one of these and 3 of those reporting to one of those, up to the CEO. The culture tended to be inwardly focused, centralized, slow to make decisions, political, risk-averse. Now, these companies thrived in the manufacturing world, but today 75% of the U.S. economy is the service sector, and we see a different approach. The companies we see today, the 21st century companies, are structured to be non-bureaucratic, with fewer rules and fewer employees, limited to fewer levels, greater spans of control, organized with the expectation that senior management will lead, lower level employees will manage specific tasks, and characterized by policies and procedures that produce dedicated and vertically structured organizations to serve the customers. The culture will tend to be externally oriented and global, empowering of the employees, quick to make decisions, open and candid, and more risk tolerant of business risk, not necessarily personal risk. So how will your leaders act, and how will they establish an ethical culture in these companies? And how do you evaluate them as a place to work? First, the leaders must be totally committed to ethical leadership. And being totally committed at the top level can yield dramatic results for 2 reasons. One, it tends to prove that the goal is worthwhile and important, and it confirms that the leader isn't going to quit before the objective is achieved. The second, the most effective leaders at all levels will take time to ensure that the correct values are believed throughout the company or the organization. This is especially important as the companies decentralize to face their markets and to serve global markets. Well, for leaders to do that, they must develop and encourage a shared sense of organization goals and purpose throughout the company. They must ensure open and candid discussions, including dissent, and they must ensure and encourage the autonomy of subordinates to achieve their goals. They have to have the highest ethical standards, including some practical cases spelled out and easy to understand. And in the seminar, we'll take a look at how one company establishes their ethical rules on the web and on the written format. These CEOs must take action also to ensure that leaders and executives are role models for all their employees, including publishing the good and bad examples. So before going to work, you must satisfy yourself through research that the company is truly committed to strong leadership and ethics. So now let's shift our focus a little bit to personal ethics. While what I've said about the business leadership environment is interesting, we're also in an era of much greater legal, market, regulatory, and public scrutiny, and the responsibility will fall on all employees to act ethically. Most of you won't be in a CEO job in the next few years unless you start your own company. So what's your personal ethical and leadership challenge, and how can you meet this challenge at whatever level you work? First of all, you must always act and think ethically. That is, creating and living to a moral culture within your business of activities, not to mention within the law. While you can make a case for various interpretations of accounting rules in cases like Enron and WorldCom, the Act still contained illegal events that were designed to defraud. Second, you'll find that it's often not the large possibly illegal act that occurs when you are young and just entering the workforce. It's more like these examples, which I'm going to tell you. These are events that I have been personally involved with or that happened to me. And we'll save the actual outcome for our seminar discussions. It's also often difficult to tell exactly what is the illegal act in some of these examples I'm going to give you. Okay, your company would like to be involved in the underwriting of some municipal bonds, but to do so, you have to pay to play, and you're told that you must, or the company must contribute $5,000 to a fundraising breakfast for the mayor. Those are pretty expensive eggs. Do you go along thinking that everybody does it, it's standard market practice, or do you stand your ground and say, this is buying business? You hire a new person from a competitor. He or she arrives the first day of work with a copy of the competitor's numbered and confidential strategic plan. Is that windfall business intelligence, or is that theft? You're asked to evaluate a customer or company that you know has potential for a large business relationship with your company, but this company is highly sensitive to criticism. So you are tempted to ease off on your analysis to hopefully gain the business for your company. You work in some form of brokerage or stock trading operation and have a chance to trade ahead of a large buy or sell offer. Trading ahead for yourself or your company or trading ahead of a more favored customer may give you favorable prices. Or you have a trade where a mistake is made. Do you pass that on to the customer or swallow it yourself? Or it's 2 minutes past the deadline for posting mutual fund trades, which is 4 o'clock. But your supervisor gives you a stack of trades from a large mutual fund company and says, your watch is fast, this is our biggest customer. Do you enter those trades knowing full well it's illegal to enter trades after 4 o'clock? Or in my case, as a 26-year-old junior Marine Corps officer in combat in Vietnam, commanding 200 men in the jungle, I'm asked to verify enemy dead, but to do so will place my troops in very dangerous circumstances. Here the metric was body count. Do I obey higher officers who are many miles to the rear, or protect my troops from sure danger just to enhance some colonel's metrics report? This is my favorite case. You work for a college that does government research. A senior person at the college, actually the president, this did not happen at Wellesley, Babson, or Olin. I think all three are happily married. The president of the college is getting married on campus, and you are asked to include some of the wedding expenses in the normal governmental research overhead charges that you're working for. What do you do about that? You are asked by the CEO to pay annual bonuses in December, not February, because there is a new income tax bill that becomes effective on January 1st. And you would expect the bonuses to be significantly higher tax rate for the executive. That actually happened when the Clinton administration came to power. Everybody knew they were going to raise taxes in early '93, and so most companies paid their bonuses in late '92. You have an employee who is terminally ill with a brain tumor, but he is on his spouse's health care plan, not your company's, and it's out of money or has reached the payout limit of $150,000 during his 9-hour operation. Do you try to put him on your company's plan during open enrollment, even with this serious prior condition? You are leaving a Middle Eastern country to fly to London, but to depart, you have to give the airport manager $100 US to get on a full flight that has empty seats. How do you put that bribe on your expense report? You work for a bank. A customer is behind on his home mortgage insurance. The bank offers and demands another policy, which is more expensive, but the bank gets a 15% kickback or a finder's fee. Is that a place you want to work for the long term? So where are we? Well, first, leadership is tightly linked and inextricably tied to ethics. The leaders of any organization at all levels, be it business, an NGO, nonprofit, not-for-profit, academic, or whatever, must set and maintain the ethical tone. Second, the actions that are illegal, that are purely black and white, are usually straightforward. It's the gray areas often occurring in day-to-day activities that require your personal ethical compass. And third, we unfortunately don't have a lot of recognizable and noteworthy national models, or at least they don't get the same level of scrutiny as the bad role models. I'm sure some of these role models are out there, and I certainly wish they would stand up and speak out. Now, what about the questions I posed at the beginning? For your career or even your first job in financial services, can you be an ethical person and an effective business person? Yes, you can, but you may, at some point in your career, have to change companies because you don't like the environment. Second, is the widespread criticism of the financial services industry justified, or has the drive of the industry for profits squandered the trust upon which it was built? The criticism is justified. Trust has been squandered, and I think it's going to take a long time for Wall Street to recover. Is the industry an easier target than government policies and oversight that have failed? Yes, absolutely, it's an easier target. Congress forced the growth of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to $7 trillion, more than 50% of the mortgage market, and they are not doing any self-analysis nor holding themselves accountable. So let me just pause there and see what questions, discussions you'd like to have on any of these subjects.